Welcome to the Product Design Podcast. I'm your host, Seth Coelen, founder of UX Cabin, where we create world-class web and mobile apps. I'm excited to bring you a behind-the-scenes look into the lives of some of the most interesting and talented people in product design. We'll get strategic advice on how they got to where they are today and things they wish they would have known earlier in their career. Hey, thanks for checking out the Product Design Podcast today. Today is a really special episode because this episode wraps up our very first year of the podcast, which is crazy and hard to believe. We've been able to talk to so many interesting and insightful guests over the last year. Personally, people have reached out, everyone from aspiring UX, UI designers, all the way to senior product designers who have benefited from these conversations. In the first year, we were able to reach 14,000 downloads, which is awesome. Thank you all so much for the support. You are the reason why we do what we do, and really appreciate you helping us get the word out about the Product Design Podcast. Now, this episode is special because we're just going to do a look back at some of the favorite clips and talks that we've had with our guests over the last year. These clips include advice from product designers at all different stages of their careers. So sit back, enjoy, and thank you so much again for this last year. It's been quite the ride, and we hope you enjoyed it too. On our very first episode, we had design systems expert Mike Dick join us. He gave us his take on if designers should know how to code. What's your opinion on designers developing?
I definitely think that if you understand people and how they use things and their motivations behind things, you can definitely be really good at UI design. You don't need to be aware of code and things like that to be a really good designer in our industry, but it helps. Understanding your medium definitely will help you work with other people, will help you work with engineers better. I think if you're a designer and you can code, you can just, whether you're good at coding for like production level code or just like getting your hands dirty and prototyping things, that little bit of code, even if you can just write a few lines of code, that can help you communicate better with your stakeholders and like your friends and your coworkers, and that will never, like, communicating better and working better and collaborating better will never go away.
Next, we had Christine Maggi. Many of you probably know her as the Design Gal on YouTube, but she's a senior product designer who works at Thistle and gave us some advice on what to focus on when you're younger and prepping to get started in the design industry. Looking back, is there anything that you wish you would have been able to tell yourself right as you're going into college or right as you're starting your career that you didn't know then that you wish you had?
Yeah, I would say, looking back specifically at college, I think I cared way too much about things that I wasn't interested in because I was going for like a good grade. We're not academics. We don't need to go to grad school. We don't need a 4.0. And for some reason, I was just like, nope, got to get the grades. I got to put 100% into all these classes that were not design related or not necessarily for my degree, my major, I mean. And so I think I would tell myself, like, chill out on the grades, enjoy this experience a little more, have a little more fun, really lean into the connections that you're building amongst your fellow design students, because your network is going to be with you for the rest of your career. And I think wherever you end up learning, if you learn alongside other people, you kind of have that shared experience to think back on and to really build great relationships from. So I would tell myself to just not miss that opportunity.
In this next clip, it features a team member from UX Cabin, Predrag Beočanin, on what to do to level up your skills when you first start out into product design. How would you suggest someone get their feet wet in product design?
I think the best approach is to just grab something that already exists that's super complicated, like Facebook or Google or Instagram, and try to build it. Because they have all the ifs solved for you. So you don't, like, let's say you're building a chat, right? And you take WhatsApp or Messenger, for example, and you're like, wait, okay, so what happens if I get 6 messages in a row? Do they go left? Do they go right? Do I get a bubble? All this is solved for you. So all you have to do is replicate it, and replicating it in the same fashion is hard. It's like not easy to make Messenger as an app or a web app. It's just not easy. So if you take something that already exists, you don't have to think about, oh, should I put like a box shadow on this button right now? You don't waste any time on that, but you just dive straight into code. That's great. But there's also like Udemy has some great courses. If you're into that, if you like, watching somebody do something and then repeating it and trying something different and maybe trying to break it to make it better, that's also a very good. But I just prefer building stuff, and building something huge. It's hard. It takes a long time, but at the end of it, like, you learn a lot.
I think, yeah, copying other people's work for the sake of practice is one of the best things you can do. It's not that you're going to, again, you're not going to make a business out of it, but you're going to learn those foundational skills that you can apply to other projects or future clients. And they're so valuable.
But at the end of it, you also have something to show. So like, after doing this for 3, 6, 12 months, you're like, I'm awesome at this. I'm the best developer alive. And then you're like, let me get a job, let me start as a junior somewhere. Let me grab an internship. But if you don't do that, if you just spend a year watching courses, it's just hard for you to demonstrate. Like, you can demonstrate your passion, sure, but like, not exactly like, hey, I can actually do stuff.
Next up, we talked with Jon Moore, Principal of Product Design at InnovateMap. He tells us how setting up a feedback session in a productive way will get you the feedback you need to help the product move forward. You mentioned getting feedback from clients. How do you set up feedback in a good way that gives you the right feedback you need for your team?
Before you show a single screen, literally tell them the screens that you're about to show them. Begin by telling a story. Say, okay, so pretend you're a user. You walk in the morning, you get your coffee, and you sit down and you land on your dashboard. That's what I'm about to show you here. And I'm going to walk you through that experience. That's kind of the first part, is setting the stage. The second part, and the most important part, is literally directing the client and helping them understand how to give feedback. It's one of the hardest things to do. When I'm sort of prepping the client, I'll say things like, okay, the type of feedback that I'm interested in, first and foremost, I want you to focus on, is it solving a problem? Is it solving a problem for the right person? Once we get past that, I want you to look at the page and make sure that for this person who is going through this workflow, do they have all the information that they need to make decisions and to do their job?
For those of you who are interested in the UX research side of things, UX researcher from UX Cabin, Jean Kaluza, shares what she wishes she would have known when she began her career. Say someone is intrigued by UX research, what would be the things that they should look into, or the things that they should start doing if they wanted to pursue a career in research?
Yeah. So one thing that I didn't realize was an option was to get involved in a already built out research oriented product team. I didn't know that was available because I learned UX from like a book in my computer screen. So I didn't know that was really a field. Come to find out that there's this whole world and people dedicating their lives to it. And it's such an awesome opportunity. I think I missed out on learning from that from the get-go and had to just try and figure it out on my own, which was much harder because UX really requires almost like a support person to get your data to the right people at the right time.
Next up, Eric Lobdell, who works on design systems at Facebook, gives us a little bit of tough love on why it's so important to keep this in mind at all points in your career.
I know you had mentioned putting your work out there. Is there anything else you would say to that person to like, hey, be sure you do this, or be sure you don't do this as you start off your career in product design?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing is just don't be lazy. I mean, there are so many key moments in your career where you need to do these things that kind of suck, like updating your portfolio. I don't know a single designer that loves doing that. It is part of the cost of maintaining your brand and like your ability to put your work out there. Is if you lose it, the work piles up and you don't want to go back and document it all, and it's in a different format. It was in Photoshop, now we're in Figma. Like there's all these hurdles that pile up if you don't continue to maintain some semblance of a portfolio. And if you're in the line of work, I mean, that's kind of the cost for entry. Or, similarly, if you're not in design, you need to maintain a resume, which is a much lower bar. But, like there are key moments where not being lazy pays dividends. And one of them, I think, is updating your portfolio, or even just having one that's not out of date. I guess
Sure.
it's the same thing. But also opportunities kind of, when they come in bulk and they don't come consistently. But if you spent any time contracting in design, I think that's another fantastic avenue, is to put yourself out there as a contract designer and see what kind of work comes in, and just say yes to everything. There are moments in your career where you kind of need to just say yes to everything that comes in.
Yeah.
Until you get to a place where you can say no to something, or you can hike up the price and see if that worked. And there's so many avenues there, but I think that's it. Like, just don't be lazy.
All right. Next up is Andrea McKinley. Andrea is a product designer at UX Cabin. She was actually the first intern we hired from our internship program. During this clip, Andrea shares the moment when she realized that changing careers from teaching to designing products would work for her.
I remember us talking about that. You came to me and you're like, I didn't realize how systematic design can be. So I think a lot of people have this idea of like, you have to be just pumping out creativity for 6 hours a day and making cool illustrations and all of these graphic arts. But it's just thinking about the design system. It's very systematic. Like there's a process to it. It's more about the rules and the methodology behind why you're using what when, versus like making a completely brand new component that no one's ever thought of before. That's the peak of creativity, right?
Absolutely. I remember making that connection, because I think what was intimidating to me was that I had never previously identified as a like quote unquote creative, right? And I live in Los Angeles, a city that a lot of folks come here from other places because they identify as creatives, and this is a place to explore other possibilities in that sense. But I'm always been like a science person and more about like logic and reason and problem solving and all that. So it was a little bit intimidating going to a field called design. But once I realized that there's actually a process, and there are like well-defined methodologies for how you can arrive at a solution for a real problem. And even the visual aspect of it is fairly systematic as well. Like that really unlocked something for me and made it so that like, actually, I can definitely do this. I can learn this visual stuff and I can apply it even though I didn't go to art school. I can figure this out and I can actually get good at it.
For the product designers aiming to work in big companies, Denise shares what she believes will set you apart and what she learned to land her role as senior product designer. Considering where we are today in product design, getting to product design over the last 5-10 years was its own unique winding path. And someone wanting to get into product design today has a different set of challenges. What advice would you give to someone who might be listening to this and saying like, man, I really want to be a product designer at the Weather Channel or another big company. I want to be like Denise. What advice would you give to someone starting out as to how to make the next step to get into product design?
So when I talk to people who are aspiring to jump into product design or UX, the first question that they have is, how good do I need to be at visual design? And I would say that is important, because if you do want to work for a corporation and their products are going to be going out to millions of people, then your work does need to be polished. But I think what's more important is learning how to tell stories, then also discovering what your superpower is. And this is something that I learned in graphic design school, was take your superpower and lean into it. Apply it to everything that you do. So for me, one of my superpowers is not only storytelling, but drawing with my hands. So sketching on paper, sketching in my iPad. How do you apply that to your daily tasks and your job to take things to the next level? And so I've been able to add a little layer of something a little bit more whimsical in this technical world, which that plus storytelling takes it to a whole nother level. I would say spend some time finding your superpower and learn to tell stories.
Next up, we get a little tip on how to manage design teams. Jake Taylor, Director of Product Design, shares how he has experienced some tough conversations and the impact they had on his career path.
Knowing that mentorship really helps create a better team environment. Obviously, there has to be hard conversations sometimes between mentees and mentors. Do you have any insight into how to have those hard conversations with people when you need to?
I've ran into both sides of management styles in my career, some more encouraging than others. For me, some of the harder conversations just in the last few years have been able to really have is, what are your goals and aspirations for your career moving forward? And how can this company or this work get you there? For me, work should be mutually beneficial. So it should help us pay our bills. We should be providing value to the company at the same time, but then it needs to work a little bit farther than that and give us the growth opportunities that we want or desire. And so I've ran into having a hard conversation with a manager and asking, my goal is to become a lead within this company. And the manager, without thinking about it, said that role is probably not going to exist here. And it was hard because, one, now that I know how management could have responded, telling me that that role isn't going to exist did nothing but demotivate me from trying to continue my career there. The opposite of that is you get a very welcoming response. When I was trying to make principal at Pitney Bowes, and my manager was like, that's awesome. Let's make a plan. I'll work with you and let's make these steps to get you where you want to be, and I'll back you up. I think that's the more welcoming approach. Obviously, that's the approach that we should be taking with a lot of these positions, but it is hard to respectfully have those conversations and some of those hard ones. But if you don't put yourself out there, no one's going to do it for you. You might have champions behind you, but you need to put that out there to the world and let it be known.
When we had Furquan on the show, he was getting ready to move from designing products at Ford to working as a product designer at Meta. His advice on sharing your work is spot on and is an excellent way for people to see what you are up to and to connect.
One thing that we talk about a lot at UX Cabin as we're considering bringing on new people or interns is, if you don't know what to do next, or if you want to improve your skills, literally just go and get one of your favorite apps, Instagram or Coinbase or whatever, and just try your best to copy it in your design program. These are like world-class apps. And if you have the skills to learn how to copy it, that's a great skill that you can turn around and show to a recruiter or a company, like, yeah, I made this. And these things are all transferable into like the next thing that you're going to do. And they all build on top of each other.
It can be very, very hard when you're first starting off to get that mindset of like, will people even be interested in my work, or is my work even good enough to share? But the reality is that what's the worst that can happen when you share your work, or you're trying to redesign an app or Coinbase or something on Dribble or your favorite app like Spotify? Just share it on Twitter and see what happens. And the design community is honestly so nice. If you don't share the work, then no one's going to know what you've been actually up to. There's a great book by Austin Kleon, Show Your Work, that helped me a lot, to be honest, to actually start sharing my stuff online and sharing your process. The whole build in public, design in public, it can help you a lot, and you can get feedback from there. It builds your confidence as a person. There's barely any reason not to show your work, really, unless it's like under NDAs or something. Like, you should, because it'll help you a lot long term, and you can see your progressive improvements as well, which is one of the coolest things, just seeing your progress as the years go on.
In another UX Cabin team member spotlight, I chatted with Travisse, full stack product designer, and he shares 2 things that he would recommend anyone getting into product design do to help them move their career along.
If someone's listening to this thinking, I want to be where Travisse is, building products, doing design, doing UX, and say they're in a different field or maybe just starting out, what advice would you have for them to get them to where you are today?
What brought forward both my skill set and my confidence in learning in the future is that I had something really specific that I was trying to build. And so I wasn't doing a bunch of memorization or storing up knowledge on a just in case basis. I was building up knowledge that's practical. And so everything I learned, I really learned for the long term. For someone starting out or trying to get into product design, I would try and think of an app that you want to design and be pretty serious about it in terms of designing it, or talk to your friends and family and volunteer to design an app for them or a website for them. That'll get you so much further ahead. And then the other thing that I've learned is, like, funny as it sounds, is to get on Twitter immediately and be very active in the design space or whatever space you're trying to get into. Specifically in design, you can learn from product leaders in the area. You can showcase your stuff. I've heard someone describe Twitter as it's like Instagram, but for thoughts. And so like Instagram, you win if you're like attractive and interesting and having an interesting life. And Twitter, you win if you have interesting thoughts. There's a little bit that's also like if you have very anger-provoking thoughts that you also like. That like the good side of Twitter is you win if you post valuable things and interesting thoughts, and you can jump ahead in your career and learning by doing that.
Here's a fantastic tip from Jadene, senior UX designer at Methods. She got specific on updating your portfolio to help you get the job you want when you are getting started in product design. Take a listen. What's some advice that you could give someone who's gone through a boot camp and is looking for a job, or graduated from university and is looking to get their first digital job? Like, what helped get you over that hump?
I owed a lot of it to my portfolio and the fact that when I graduated, I did not get the job with the same portfolio that I graduated with. So with every interview I had, I iterated on it, I improved it. And I really talked in great detail about the work experience that I did. In the final year of my degree, I did manage to do 2 days a week at an agency. And I used the experience that I had there. It was a really well-rounded experience because I did like a bit of marketing design, a bit of like social media design and ads. So I got a lot of variety there. And I tailored my portfolio with each application I went for. I didn't use the same generic overall. If one company was big on mobile apps, I would tailor it to mobile apps. I would talk about the skills that relate to the job role. I became better at applying and presenting myself to companies because of that lengthy delay. So advice to those who are just starting out is to really read the job description, put together a portfolio that relates to the company, really tailor it and make it specific, and not just to send out generic ones to everyone. It shows the company that you paid attention, especially if you kind of talk about what projects they do, or you kind of relate and reflect and show that you've invested the time to research them. It makes you stand out to them also.
Femke is a senior product designer at Wealthsimple, and many of you know her from the valuable content that she shares on YouTube and her other social media channels. She talked with me about her top 3 tips on what to do when you are looking to get into product design and are unsure what route you want to take. Another thing I wanted to get your take on is if someone was looking to switch careers or get into product design today, what would you suggest for them to do today, starting from little or no experience?
Yeah, I think a lot of things. I would definitely encourage folks to just search online and try to find people that are teaching this topic. I'm one of so many creators out there that are teaching design online and providing this content. And there's so much free stuff out there now these days too. So you don't have to go and get a 4-year, $100,000 degree.
Yes.
You don't want to. So, be resourceful, do some search online, see where you could get some of this free content. Though that said, there is so much of it that it can also be very overwhelming. And so I talk to a lot of early stage designers who are just overwhelmed at the amount of free information online.
Yeah.
So I think my second tip is pick 2 to 3 sources that you trust. And maybe those sources are like websites like medium.com, for example, or maybe it's a creator that you really trust and you really enjoy their content. Pick a couple and go all in on those 2 to 3 things. You don't need to learn from every single designer on the internet because you're going to hear conflicting things and that might only stress you out a little bit. So that would be my second piece of advice. And then the third piece is adapt your learning to your learning style. If you are someone that does want that rigorous educational structure, then maybe do go and get the degree. That's totally fine. Yeah. Or if you're more like, I want to learn in my own time, maybe an online boot camp is for you. Or if you're like, I don't want any education training, I'm going to be totally self-taught, cool, do that. Maybe meet some other designers online who are doing the same thing, maybe freelance, figure it out as you go. That's totally cool. There's no right or wrong, I think, when it comes to actually learning the practice of design. So just think about how you like to learn, what works best for you in your current situation, and do that thing, because it's not going to be wrong.
As head of design at North Star, Dennis Cortés shared his approach to managing a design team and how to provide and receive feedback to make sure his team is functioning productively. Do you have any insight or feedback as to how to effectively work in a team or manage your team or facilitate good feedback and critique within a team to keep it functioning well and productive?
Yeah. So kind of two parts to that. I'll start with how you can critique and provide feedback. I think the main thing is to be objective in the feedback and understand that the feedback you're receiving is objective. Like, it's all about building what is best for the product and best for the user. So if somebody tells me that my work isn't meeting a goal that we need to do, it's not because I did anything wrong. On the other side, when you're presenting work, I think something that's been super helpful for me is asking for specific feedback that I'm looking for. It's like, here's exactly what I'm looking for. You don't need to worry about maybe these buttons over here. We're not focusing on those right now. So let's focus on what's important right here. Yeah. And then for the part of like managing and building design teams, I think culture of team should always be the main priority. Hiring people isn't just about skill. It should be about, how does this person complement the team? And then also thinking about, from a manager perspective, learn to care deeply about your teammates, and also listening empathetically has been very impactful for me. I try and listen to people and think about where they're coming from more so than how I can change their opinion or give them advice to kind of change what they're thinking. It's like, let me think about where this person is coming from and how I can kind of help them from their position. And then also lastly is know when you need to teach and when you need to learn. So what I mean by that is if you're always learning, it's always going to be a constant learning and growth period for you. So even now where it's like I've managed people, I know when I need to kind of step in and give my opinion or give advice or give help, but also when I need to step back, let this other person kind of lead or teach me something.
Many of you already know Jesse Showalter. He is a full stack designer, mentor, and content creator that many of you follow on YouTube. He gives us some real advice about how to conquer the different levels of pride that might pop up in your career as a product designer.
I think every designer goes through a time where they have to personally detach themselves from their designs or what they create, because everything when you start off is incredibly personal. It's kind of just like an extension of yourself. It's your baby. As you go along in your career, it becomes more about like, what does the user test say? What does the value, business value? Would you say after that is kind of when you learned that, or did it take you a few more years?
It took me a little while. It's a shot to your pride, right? But like,
for sure,
you have to, it's a good thing. If you're not used to it, most people aren't. Okay. I'll just say this, like most people are not used to constructive criticism, feedback, and having a masochistic kind of like desire to say, tell me what I did wrong here. But if you go to design school, you go to art school, they'll put your beautiful babies, your creations up on a board and let somebody run red marker through it. The first time that ever happened to me, I was like, oh God, I'm a failure. Like, how dare you? Let me pick at yours now. There was all sorts of these little personal insufficiencies and flaws that start to come out. There's a level of that the general public, quote unquote, doesn't have. But then you have that young, prideful designer that goes, yeah, I've been through all that. Now I know nobody should be able to. And you don't realize at the end of the day, you're not the CEO. You're not the owner. You need to do what serves the client, not you. That's another hurdle you have to kind of overcome. And when you become a business owner yourself and you have to realize, I actually do know more than most clients that come to me. They say, hey, Jesse, we're a nonprofit, a 501c3. We need a new website. We've never done this before. I go, well, I've done about 50 of these. And they go, oh, we don't like that button there. I go, well, you're stupid. That's how I'm feeling inside, right? There's another hurdle of pride that says, okay, now I need to become a teacher.
Yep.
an advocate, and I need to show what the Bible would talk about was patience and love for you and not brush you aside, but go, hey, I need to consider you as really, really valuable and important. I'm going to teach you and tell you why. At the end of the day, if you don't value my opinion here, then you're not attacking me and my baby. It's just business, right? So there's levels of pride that need to be overcome. And I'm sure there's another level that I'm at age 37 of 14 years in the industry, I haven't learned yet. And if we do another podcast, you and me in 5 years, I might go, I found that new hurdle. It was really painful to overcome. So I'm waiting for it.
Last fall, we ran our second internship at UX Cabin. Once it was over, I chatted with the interns about their 3-month-long internship opportunity experience. Here's what they had to say about what they found to be most valuable during their experience. Thinking about the internship and everything that you guys have gone through over the past 3 months, in your opinion, what is the most beneficial thing that this internship has provided you?
It has really shown me what I do not know. I had been learning on my own for like 6 to 8 months. And I feel like I learned so much more in these 3 months than I have like doing anything on my own. Like I started doing the UX Google certificate and I got 3/4 of the way through it. I'm like, I don't think I'm going to get a good amount of experience out of this. And we started the actual internship. And I think maybe like the second week we got like into like super deep readings. And I was just like, wow, this is like super intense. We're going to learn so much doing this.
I tried taking the self-taught route for a couple of months, although I was learning a lot because I was doing the Google certificate as well as the University of Michigan certificate on Coursera. I knew I was learning a lot, but I was always worried that there would be gaps in my learning. And it actually wasn't until I joined the internship that I realized how many gaps I had. I actually thought going into the internship, like, oh, I've got this. I'm going to know so much. And then when I started learning within the first month, I was like, wow, there's a lot of stuff that I don't know and have never been exposed to. And that was like a wonderful feeling to feel like I was filling in those gaps in my knowledge.
There's a couple of things that was super beneficial. The actual activities and the way it was broken down, like, for example, the modules and such, like we had to learn the UI side, the UX, and then finally do some group activities together. And lastly is being within a community with you guys, at UX Cabin, because product design and working with the company, like it's a team effort, and having a very supportive community so that we can do like lunch and learns, design mentorship, and having a Slack channel so we can communicate and bounce ideas with each other and suggestions, and just being there to help us. That's probably like the biggest benefit of being in this internship here at UX Cabin, because you have these people that are very supportive and they're here to teach you, and so that you can learn and grow, so you can take those skills and move forward with it, whatever goals you're going for.
In our next team member spotlight, we talked with Joseph España, senior product designer. He shared his advice on getting started in product design and how to best leverage your network. Do you have any tips that you would offer up to anyone getting into product design?
The first thing to do, like definitely reach out, to your network, reach out online. There's definitely like a lot more opportunities at this point in time. I feel like the demand for designers is like sort of skyrocketed in a way. Just kind of putting yourself out there online, like whether that's Twitter or LinkedIn, even like Instagram, posting your work on there and seeing what people think, Dribble and different Slack communities. And then YouTube definitely is still teaching me a lot of things about design in terms of like how to present your designs during an interview, or what questions specifically to ask, or like how they operate their user research process. There's definitely like a lot of great resources on YouTube too for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it feels like anything you want to learn, you can learn. The hard part is just knowing what you should learn, right? Like knowing the learning path, knowing, is this valuable for me to be sinking my time into? It's almost like you need a mentor to kind of give you that learning path, right? And that's probably the trickiest part. Because like once you get a good track or a good mentor, like it's just a matter of time until you are doing the right things, thinking you're along the right path, knowing what right questions to ask. I think in going along with kind of what you were saying about reaching out to people, we've had folks on the show who have gotten jobs just because they had a previous relationship with someone and they kind of had that like warm intro, foot in the door. And then after they had established a relationship, it's a lot easier to talk about, hey, what do you want to do for your next opportunity? Or what are your goals for the next year? And being able to kind of have that foot in the door to talk about their job opening that they have or a career switch or whatever.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, referrals definitely help. It's definitely like sort of that word of mouth kind of effect, being able to like reach out to your friends or coworkers or people that you meet online and then see if there's a good fit for you at their company or a company that they know of.
Freelance is a great way to expand your skills and see what you like most, but it is not for everyone. Peter Loving, who is senior product designer and founder of User Active, talked through some considerations to make before making the leap into freelancing. What sort of strategies might you give to folks who they're considering freelance? Can you kind of take someone through how they might evaluate what considerations they need to think about before making the leap?
Yeah, I think the key things are having the ability to develop a bit of a network where you can get opportunities to have freelance gigs. And obviously you need to develop some kind of portfolio or showcase to present your ability and your skill set. So you usually need to work on that first. Get your portfolio website up and running, showcasing the kind of projects that you want to do and your skills in them. If you don't have that, I think, the classic route is getting a few opportunities to work, even if it's pro bono, to get a few projects where you can show that.
Or even fake projects, I would say.
Yeah, they seem to work really well as well. I've seen that's really popular with a lot of designers. Even designers that I've hired. There are two key things besides that I would say to focus on. One is the business side of things, having a contract, having a clearly define how you work, whether that's an hourly rate or a day rate, set a clear rate and have a contract that you work with. In the UK, you have to register yourself as a sole trader and you start to do your own taxes. Probably have a similar system. So I would say, don't necessarily do that before you start freelancing. Focus on getting your freelancing successful and where you're getting projects and you're getting paid, and then set that up because there's a bit of administration. And I think sometimes the administration can distract you or scare you off from, you want to actually show that you can freelance first. You kind of want to validate that for yourself.
Right.
And then the key thing is all about your network and how you find your projects.
Hindsight is 2020, and one of my favorite questions to ask on the show is what our featured guests would advise their younger selves on if they had known what they know now. Elizabeth Alli, product designer, mentor, and founder of Designer Up, gave us some great things to think about no matter where we are on our product design career path. If you were to look back and give your younger self advice as you're starting out in your career, what would you advise your younger self on?
I would probably say things are probably not going to turn out in the future the way you expect them to from where you sit now. There's a lot of experience left that could change things for you. So just be really open, I think, to what could be. And you never know what worse luck your bad luck is saving you from. I think that has happened to me in so many occasions where I thought this is the worst thing ever that could happen. And then I realized that, wow, this actually led me to someplace even better, or it actually avoided something really bad happening. So sometimes I think that's just a reminder to, even when bad things happen, to just kind of be open and be grateful no matter what's kind of coming your way. And then probably drink more water. Yeah. Don't drink enough water.
All great advice. Yeah, I think, it's just so crazy to think back to like 2020, all of the jobs that weren't around then that are just like exploding now. Anything from like SEO expert to UX design. My personal theory is that the more technology advances, obviously certain jobs get automated and replaced. But I think there's always going to be like new jobs coming and evolving and coming out like that we can't even wrap our minds around. I love your advice about just, hey, maybe you are in a dead end career. Maybe it feels like the worst thing ever. but maybe it's the opportunity of a new start in a better career.
Yeah. Because I've seen it so many times over with so many people. And sometimes that it just takes that for you to realize it, and to actually be pushed to try something new and to not be complacent and sort of to step out your comfort zone.
It was fun to chat with Danielle Justilien about the strategies that landed her job as a UX designer at IBM. She did a lot of work upfront during her bootcamp and then shares tips that she shared in this clip that will help you stand out from the other brand new product designers in your field. Throughout your bootcamp, what strategies did you use to help get you that first job?
During my bootcamp, it wasn't just being the work that I was doing within the bootcamp, but also being involved in the design community overall. I was making sure that I was connecting with other designers, getting mentorship from other people, getting feedback on my portfolio and my designs, getting advice about interviewing before I was even interviewing, and making sure that I was just staying informed about all that it takes to become a designer and to really land that first job. I also got involved in different design communities so I could work on projects outside of my actual boot camp and get those ready for my portfolio. So I think it was really just diving deep into UX and making sure I was surrounded by all of the people that I needed, all of the resources that I needed, taking the time I needed to learn to be able to be prepared for actually interviewing and working on my portfolio really hard. I really spent a lot of time, a lot of hours into building those case studies to really be able to sell myself as a designer when I went into interviews. And with that, after finishing my portfolio, I made sure that I shared it with probably 10 or 15 experienced designers to get feedback and make sure that I was in the place to really be able to talk about myself and show myself as a designer and really be able to just have my skills kind of shine throughout my portfolio. And that was one thing that my manager said kind of sold me on our team, was just the ability of my skills that was shown through my portfolio. And I think that's an important thing. I know that there's a lot of emphasis on portfolios for UX designers, and there's a lot of controversy on whether or not they're necessary, especially as a junior designer. But it is what kind of helps show who you are as a designer and how you work amongst your other team members and what you can kind of bring to the table. And I think that's really what prepared me and really being able to do the job that I'm doing now. I'm constantly showing my work and having to get feedback from other designers and stakeholders. So why not apply that to our portfolio? Why not start early and start learning how to receive feedback, receive constructive criticism, and apply it to our work? Feedback is always helpful, especially if it's coming from an experienced designer. You're learning something new. They have perspective that you don't.
During my conversation with Jed Bridges, we talked about his fondness for generalism. When so many product designers want to become a specialist, listen to why he has pursued a career of generalist and how it has helped him find success. So one thing I know that you have kind of talked to me about is this idea of being a generalist in your design practice and kind of having full coverage across product, UI, UX, print, everything. What's your strategy behind that?
Yeah, well, my fondness of generalism in design, I think just came out of my own personal career experience where I would show up at a startup, and startups are usually bootstrapped, and you have to have a broad set of skills to get something out the door. And so you learn those skills and take on those needs. Having pursued generalism for a while now, the main reason I am a fan of it and recommend it to people is it makes you highly employable, right? So when you have a broader set of knowledge of design, it all feeds into specific moments of application that you can then apply to various roles and jobs and whatever your job you're trying to land. A good company will sort of put you in the place that they think you'll add the most value. And then a great company will actually let you go to within that culture of where you think you're the most passionate, because that is actually where you will have the most impact. So when you have a general set of skills, if you work at a large company, say, you can actually like find a space that you're passionate about. And if it's really limited, it's going to be hard. You're just going to be like, I just know conversion optimization. That's the thing I do. That's the team I'm going to be on. And it's much harder to explore if your interest is ever peaked elsewhere. I totally understand the argument for specializing, but what people don't realize a lot of the time
is being a generalist doesn't mean you employ the whole set of broad skills at a role. It means that you have them available to employ, right? So if I have these 10 things that I'm good at that all kind of summarize my design skill set, I'm not going to use those at a job. I'm going to probably use 2 or 3 of them, right? So being a generalist, again, coming back to being highly employable and highly adaptable, I just think that's a common misconception to sort out.
Sure.
It doesn't mean that you have to use them all the time. That would kind of be chaos. It means that you have tools that you can pull out as necessary for specific moments and specific roles within a job, right?
Later in the season, I was excited to get career coach Tom McCormack on the show and share a different perspective. From working with candidates in the industry to help them along their career paths, Tom shared what he enjoys most about career coaching and what he looks for in the candidates that he works with. Getting into product design and UX is such a non-linear path. It's not like go to school for 4 years and you can throw your resume up and get a job, or go do this certification and you can get your entry-level job. There's all of these potential things you can do that may or may not be helpful. But I think the core that you have to have is you have to be really excited about doing the work of UX or product design.
Yeah, that's very true. And the people that have that, so from a career coaching lens, the way I'm coming at it, if someone has that, then you try to just fuel that fire. So if you're like, clearly, whenever we talk about this thing, you start talking a mile a minute, you have a lot of ideas, it's fun for you. Then you just try to kind of like build their confidence and encourage them to pursue that interest, whether it's a particular tool, a particular skill set, a particular type of role, a particular industry. There's lots of different things that you can leverage there. And
sure,
you have them follow that. If somebody doesn't have that, that's obviously the trickier scenario, where you say like, what are you passionate about? What are you excited about? What types of roles are you targeting? And they just say like, I just really want a job and I'd like to make some money. Those are good things. Then, then you're like, okay, I have my work cut out for me on this one. Like, this is going to be a little bit more of a conversation, but it can also be even more transformative because that person hasn't, for whatever reason, hasn't stopped to think about those things very much. And then you need to build from square one and just be like, okay, let's talk about what you've done in your life and what have you liked and what have you not and why. And then you scaffold on top of that to the point where they start to have, as a career coach, it's cool when someone has an aha moment and they're like, oh, I really like that thing, but I never even really realized it until now. And then you're okay, that's the little ember that we're going to try to heat up and build it to the flame of your job search strategy. I know it's cliche, but finding your why is really important. And that's the challenge and the fun of career coaching. It's hard because finding your why is a very personal and philosophical journey for people. But when it happens for people, it's also really exciting and fulfilling from a career coach standpoint.
I was so excited for the episode where UX Cabin lead product designer Matias Fiori joined me. During the conversation, Matias shared one thing that he did well when he first started his career, and one thing he wishes he would have done differently. Thinking about where you are today, what mistakes did you make back then that you look back and you're like, oh, if only I had known this, I would have been so much better?
I think I was too worried about having some success. When you're in your 20s and you don't have the pressure to pay a lot of bills and you have kids and like a house and a mortgage, when you don't have that and you're just learning something that you like, I would say just try to relax a little bit, because that first stage of your life, it's going to be all about experimenting and learning and making mistakes. And I was too hard on myself in the way that I evaluated my performance and the outcome of what I did. And the other thing is just try to learn to love what you're doing instead of always pursuing what you think is going to be your ideal. And that's something that I did right, I think, because only like some clients weren't like the best clients to work with, either because of budget or their businesses wasn't like the best in terms of like what you can do visually with it, right? And another way to put it is like, it's great to work for a coffee shop, right? Because you have this specialty coffee and then they might have a shop that looks super nice. And then designing a visual identity for it or the menu, that's great. But if you're designing a logo for a lawyer's firm, not that it's anything wrong with a lawyer's firm, but it's like you have less to play with. But if you kind of change your mindset and you try to love that thing that you're doing, you actually gonna be enjoying a lot working on that little logo, because this is more like you put yourself in a position where you kind of abstract yourself from the rest of the noise and you're just focusing on creating a great logo. That's kind of my point. Like, learning to love whatever thing you're doing.
Brian Lynn, Director of Product Design, shared great advice on hiring manager expectations and how to level up in his episode. In this clip, Brian shares one of the critical things that has helped him out at the beginning of his career and still helps him to this day. We look back and we see all the things that we wish we would have known or wish we would have done when we were younger. Curious to see what you would look back and tell yourself something you wish you knew when you were starting out that you know now.
The thing that actually helped me the most in my early days, and I still lean on this today, is having a really strong community of peers around me all the time that I feel comfortable sharing my work, getting real candid feedback from them, and just kind of learning and building and keeping each other accountable to what we're showing and doing constant. Without that support structure, it's really challenging to grow as a designer. Like, you need people around you to both support you, but also be very critical that aren't just going to cheer you, right? And because of, what I said in my intro of like having that, being part of that pilot program and all of us kind of coming up together as a class, those were my peers. That was my circle. And I still keep in touch with many of them today. Right. And we still talk about things professionally, personally, and it's a beautiful thing. So that I encourage people who are just starting out to find your community, like find your peers. Growing together is going to be far more valuable and interesting, really, experientially, like, as you grow as a professional, than having someone who is an influencer or whatnot. Like, yes, look up to them. Yes, learn from them, but have realistic expectations and be real with yourself about how you can grow. Like, that's part of being a good practitioner of this craft. And I say practitioner and I equate it to being a tradesperson, right? We are always practicing. It doesn't matter how senior or how seasoned you are. We are always practicing what we do to improve. So it's better to ally yourself with folks who are also of that mindset.
In the final featured guest episode of Season 1, Michael Riddering, who's the founding designer of Maven and creator of Figma Academy, came on the show to chat. We discussed some great ways to stand out to hiring managers to get the job you want. So this is probably another good lesson we could learn. Like, when you find a job that you really want or you feel like you're best suited for, like, how did you go about applying for that and kind of getting in front of them and actually landing the job?
In my opinion, it's a quality over quantity thing. Like, I would so much rather spend the time to write 3 well-crafted and, like, we say personalized, but it's not just about like the individual that you're reaching out to, but like make them know that this is not just like a copy and paste outreach message. Like, you care about this company. Like, you know something about this company. You've done the research. There's a reason why you're reaching out. 3 of those trumps 15 generic outreaches every time, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I completely agree. You can stand out a huge way from doing that, because most people are going to copy and paste or just blind apply or whatever. And I think you can even go another step further and make yourself like a Loom intro.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. I love that idea.
No one is doing this. If you do this, you will probably at least get a call back. There's these little things that you could take 5 minutes extra to do, or even do a really short mini portfolio review that no one else is doing. And you can get yourself to the head of the pack by, a really nice letter and maybe a Loom video.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. One time I took a Webflow template and created a new page on my website, and it was / and then the company I was applying for. And I just kind of wrote my cover letter as a website. It only took like an hour or something like that, but it was so worth it. Like, I got a response from somebody that everyone would know on this podcast as a result of that email.
That is brilliant. I love that idea. So that's a wrap on season 1 of the Product Design Podcast. This episode brought together all the top rated advice clips that we shared on social media over the last year. It has been such a fantastic year, and we hope you got as much out of it as we have. We look forward to season 2 as we continue to bring fantastic featured guests so they can share their knowledge and insight with all of our listeners. Thank you again for all of your support this past year, and we're excited to continue bringing you advice and helping you along at any stage of your product design career. Thanks so much for hanging out with us today on the Product Design Podcast. If you enjoyed our conversation, be sure and go follow our guests. Let them know they did a great job and you learned a lot. More to come in the following weeks as we bring on new guests. Please hit that subscribe button so that you will get these podcasts and learn a ton about the product design community. Excited to see you next time. Thanks.